We are glad to see you, those of you who have gathered here in Marwick Hall on the campus of Monte Vista Grove, and we welcome those of you who are joining us online via our YouTube channel. We have a very, very special gathering today, and I'll introduce our speaker in just a few moments. Guy Gardner is going to take us on a tour from space this afternoon. And so with that in mind, Guy thought that it might be good for us to be reminded once again from Psalm 8 of this beautiful perspective that's provided by the psalmist. Psalm 8. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and with honor. You made them rulers over the work of your hands. You put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, all that swims the paths of the sea. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Let us pray. We listen to this ancient prayer written thousands of years ago, and yet so true in our day as it was then. All that you have created, our God, speaks of your glory. And when we consider the beauty of your creation, we are awestruck by your beauty, your majesty, your power, your glory. And yet in this psalm, we move from the heavens to the utterances of babes, who also, in their own way, recognize your glory. And so we join our voice with those this afternoon. We thank you for Guy, for his distinguished career of service, for the vibrancy of his faith in you, and for how he will illumine our minds and our hearts this afternoon as we listen to him and see his presentation. So we are grateful, our Lord, for the privilege of this gathering this afternoon, in Christ's name. So before I introduce Guy, please turn in your hymnals to number 23, an appropriate hymn to sing with the theme this afternoon. Marilyn has chosen number 23, God, You Spin the Whirling Planets. over the past several years, I've had the privilege of getting to know Guy. We're part of a reading group that joins together once every 6 to 8 weeks as we read a variety of different kinds of literature and reflect not only on the books that we're reading, but also on our lives. So I remember, Guy, in a conversation, I think it was at your house, when we were reading Wendell Berry's book, Jayber Crow, which is the story of a particular community in the southeast, and Jayber's the barber. And as the barber, he sort of carries the lore of this little village, and the book runs over 50 or 60 years. So not only is he a barber, but he's also the keeper of the history. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, you started talking about your grandmother and how you had taken this photo of your grandmother, and all you said was, yeah, and I just put a piece of tape on it and put it there on the dashboard of the mission vehicle. And I thought, well, that's an interesting phrase. Wonder what that means. And that's when I discovered that our speaker today, Guy Gardner, has carried on a very gracious and long career as an Air Force pilot, and then later becoming a NASA astronaut. And you piloted 2 Space Shuttle missions, STS-27 and STS-35. You've held leadership roles, including head of the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School, NASA Associate Administrator for Space Flight, and an FAA Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety. And if that wasn't enough, after you were finished with your government service, you decided to teach high school math and physics, and then later served as a leader at the Riverside Military Academy and Williamson College of Trades. On top of all that, in 2014, you hiked the Appalachian Trail. Now, you teach homeschool students those same subjects of math and physics. Guy's wife, Linda, isn't able to be with us this afternoon because she's taking care of some of the grandchildren. They live just 2 blocks from here, just on the other side of San Gabriel on San Pasquale. And we look forward to hearing from you today, Guy, as you come and help us think about the splendor of the heavens and what you've learned through your life experience. Please welcome Guy Gardner.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be with you today. Yeah, basically I can't hold a job is what he was trying to tell you. So what I'd like to do today is I've got a video to share with you. And then we'll have some comments also to share with you. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end so I can focus on whatever else you're interested in that I don't cover. And so what I basically cover in my talk is the answer, hopefully, to the question that I get asked the most, which is simply, what's it like to fly in space? So before I get to that, how many of you would like to fly in space? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you know somebody you'd like to send to space? Round trip or one way? Okay. One way, okay. Yeah, I usually get more hands on the second question than the first one. Well, we're going to talk about that, and the way I'm going to do it is I've got a video that I'm going to share with you about my experiences and some other astronaut experiences as well. And before I get to that, I have a lot of fun, and I hope you will too have a lot of fun, is what I like to do is simply describe for you with words what it's like to go for a ride into space and have you imagine yourselves going through that experience. So are you up for doing a little imagining this afternoon? Okay. So what we're going to do is imagine getting ready to launch. Now I've got another job for you though, is as you imagine yourself going through, we're going to start with a launch, okay, riding a rocket. As you go through that imagining, think of a word or two that you might use to kind of summarize that experience for you, because I like to collect those words and we'll share those. Okay, so get ready to go fly in space. I'm going to talk about my experience on the Space Shuttle. The rockets they ride today are very similar, and where it's different, I'll try to point out those differences. So first thing to do, get dressed in your pressure suit. They are heavy, they're bulky, they're hot, they're not comfortable, but they're designed to protect you in case a variety of things might go wrong. Here's the first difference. Ours were orange. Today, they're white. You've probably seen pictures. They got the little black boots and everything. They're really cool look. I think they look a lot better than what we flew with. But they're designed to do the same thing. So pick your color, white or orange. Get dressed in your suit. Then get strapped in your seat really tight. It's even like our younger grandkids have in the back of the car with the strap around both sides of your waist, both shoulder straps, and even the strap up between your legs because you don't want to fall out during launch, okay? So now you're not sitting like you are here. This is the way on the Space Shuttle we were sitting for landing because the Space Shuttle landed like an airplane, actually a big glider that didn't glide very well, but it landed on a runway, so we were sitting up, you know, so we could fly it and land the shuttle. But for launch, of course, it's tilted up on its tail, and so you're actually lying on your back, on the back of your seat, and that's the way they are in the capsules today for both launch and landing. Matter of fact, their seats are a lot more comfortable than ours, because they're kind of form-fitted for them since they're doing both launch and landing. So imagine that. In your seat, in your pressure suit, strapped in really tight, lying on your back. Everybody there? Now I want you to imagine that your seat is bolted down to 4 million pounds of high explosive rocket fuel. And somebody lights the fuse. And you know you're going somewhere and you're going to get there really fast. Just hang on, hope it's the right place. Now, in the Space Shuttle, they actually, we're going to see in the video here, they had 3, we call them main engines on the back of the orbiter, the airplane part itself, that burned the fuel in the big orange tank. We'll see that in the video. And then 2 solid rocket boosters, the white boosters on the side. And we would actually light the 3 main engines at T-7 seconds because we could stay on the launch pad, get them up to speed, computers would check them out, and if everything looked good, then we light the 2 solid boosters, and away you go. 7 million pounds of thrust in the Space Shuttle, pushing you back into your seat. So there's a lot of noise, a lot of shaking and vibration, and the acceleration forces you feel right at liftoff we talk in terms of gravity, the force of gravity. So we feel 1 time the force of gravity now, and we abbreviate that 1G. You've heard that term before. At liftoff in the shuttle, it's actually about 1.5, 2 Gs, but as the weight burns down, it quickly increases to 3 times the force of gravity, 3 Gs. Now, it's more efficient to actually have higher Gs during launch, and that's what they have in the capsules, 4.5 to 5 Gs. But since the Space Shuttle had big wings on it, it carried sensitive payloads, you didn't want to have to design them for any more stress than you had to, so they could reduce it to 3 Gs and have a slightly less efficient trajectory into orbit. So there you are, on your back, being pushed back into your seat, shake, rattle, and rolling, and the sense of power that you can feel underneath you. Imagine what that is like. Now, from liftoff, you accelerate out in 8.5 minutes, you accelerate to 17,500 miles an hour. It's about 5 miles a second, okay? So imagine how quickly you could get to the airport or whatever at 5 miles a second. Of course, the problem is stopping when you get there. But 5 miles a second. So imagine what it'd be like to ride a rocket. As you peek out the window, in the first minute, you can actually see the horizon, the sky, go from blue to black as you're looking out as you head up into orbit. So imagine what it'd be like to ride a rocket and what word or words you might use. And now, the second thing I want you to imagine is you hit 17,500 miles an hour, the engines shut down, and you instantly go from that 3 or 4.5 to 5 Gs, pushing you back into your seat, to 0 Gs of force, and you're weightless. So imagine what it'd be like to be weightless. We could be weightless right now and just float. Imagine what that'd be like. A lot easier to change out the light bulbs up here. Imagine what it'd be like. I call it and I like this group because you can identify with me. Remember the Olympic gymnast back in the 1980s, world famous? She got the first 10, I think, in an Olympic gym, Mary Lou Retton. I call it the Mary Lou Retton Eat Your Heart Out experience. Now, I'm updating it to the Simone Biles Eat Your Heart Out experience, but you guys know who Mary Lou Retton is. So you can do all kinds of these flips and tumbles and twists and all that kind of stuff. I can't do any of it down here, but when you're weightless, you can just do that, play around. You might also think of what it'd be like to be in here and everything weightless because you're floating. The chairs are also floating. The food on the back table is floating, as well as the tables. All the drinks and liquids are floating. Or imagine dinner with everything weightless, what that would be like. Okay, and think of a word you might use. Third and last thing I want you to imagine. You're up in orbit. You're going 17,500 miles an hour. You're about 250 to 300 miles up above the surface of the planet, and you're weightless, and you float over the window, and you look out the Earth going by below. Imagine what that would be like. Now, it's not that little blue ball in the blackness of space. You've all seen pictures of that. That's what the astronauts coming back from the moon got to see. But at 250, 300 miles above an 8,000-mile diameter planet, if the Earth were a basketball, you'd only be like a quarter an inch or so above the surface. So it fills your field of view. You look out at the horizon, you can see the curvature of the Earth, and we'll see that in the video here, and the thin blue bands of the Earth's atmosphere that protect us from outer space. It's about 2,000 miles away. When you look down, the colors and the hues, they're not just all blue ocean and green and brown landmass. There are a variety of colors and even textures to every place on the Earth as you're going around. And you circle the Earth every 90 minutes. Every hour and a half, you go completely around the planet. So imagine what that'd be like to look down. Now, the sense of speed, although you're going 17,500 miles an hour, your sense of speed is not all that great because you're up so high, 250 miles. It's actually very similar to that in a commercial airplane when you're going 500 or so miles an hour, but you're up 35,000 feet. And so when you look out in the airplane, you see cities and towns and rivers going by below. When you look out of your window on the space station or on the Space Shuttle and when I was flying, you see countries and continents and oceans going by below. Again, circling. Took us from San Diego to Florida 10 minutes. Okay, so, and we've driven that, and it's a lot more than 10 minutes by car on the interstate. So imagine what that'd be like, looking down at the Earth from space and what word or words you might use. And now what I'd like to do is have any volunteers for a word of what it'd be like for you to ride a rocket, be weightless, or look at the Earth from space. Yeah.
Scary and awesome.
Scary and awesome. Two great words. Very good. Yeah. Yes, sir. Thrilling. Another great word. You can kind of sense a different spirit here. Scary, thrilling. Yes, right over here.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Very good. Yeah. Fantastic. Yes, I am. Fantastic. Anybody else?
As you spoke, I just kept saying, wow.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. You guys got great words. One of mine has been, I have some words, but you've picked one so far. Anybody else? Because then we're going to get to the video. Okay, before we do, I know you've all got words. So on the count of three, everybody shout out your word at the same time. You ready? 1, 2, 3. A lot of wows. Good. Okay, now in the video, I have more work for you to do. In the video, I've actually got 4 words that are going to show up on the screen. So I have a task for you, and that is when that word comes up, everybody shout out that word together. Can you do that? Okay. And by the way, as Terry mentioned, by the way, didn't he read Psalm 8 in just an incredible fashion? You'd think he'd been in Christian ministry for a year or two. I thought that, I read that psalm a lot, and that really moved me the way. Thank you, Terry. Where was I? I got distracted here. Oh, the 4 words are going to shout up. And as Terry mentioned, I've been a high school teacher, and so at the end, we got to have a quiz. That's right, but we'll make it easy. We'll all do it together. Okay, so Edgar, if we can, or whoever's running it back there, if we can get the video started. And I'm going to be narrating the video for you as we get through it. Uh-oh. It's okay, he'll get it figured out here. And we're actually going to start with my second launch. I launched back in 1988 and 1990, and it's nice to have an audience that was alive back then. And so we're going to start with my second launch, which was a night launch. And here we go. But it was still, so it's a night launch, and there's the shuttle out on the launch pad. And you might recognize that young-looking bald guy with the mustache there coming out.
Okay, booster, I see 3 green ones. We got 3 ready. Yes, sir. Good tank.
Here we are crawling in the hatch of the shuttle.
OTC, PLT.
I was the PLT, or the pilot, on both of my flights. And the last thing I did was start auxiliary power units, which are basically power the hydraulic systems that control the gimbaling of the 3 main engines on the back of the shuttle. And we'll see that right here. You can see we're testing them out, make sure that the gimbals work. And then T-minus 7 seconds, we're going to light the main engines. Computers check them out. Everything looks good. And at T0, we light the 2 solids, and away we go. So imagine what it'd be like for you to ride on this rocket. Night launches are really cool because they really light up the sky a lot more than day launches. And you notice how, the other thing was that we also had this little cloud deck, because we're up in the front end, we don't see the light so much. But when we flew through this cloud deck, it really lit up the sky around us as well. Now you notice how easy it is to see the exhaust coming out of the 2 solid boosters, but you don't see anything coming out of the 3 main engines. You can see that they're lit here in just a second. And that's because they're burning liquid oxygen and hydrogen together from the big orange tank, which make water. So it's just steam coming out, very high velocity, high pressure steam. After 2 minutes, the solids used up their fuel. They were jettisoned off to the side, and they had parachutes that came out. They floated down the ocean, and they were reused. Meanwhile, we continue to burn for another 6.5 minutes the 3 main engines as we accelerate out to 17,500 miles an hour. Okay, we're going to go to my first launch now, which was a early morning launch, but it was still nighttime when we headed out, still dark when we headed out the launch pad. There's that young-looking ball guy again. Kind of look like Orange Gumby's walking out here. That old cartoon character, if you remember him. Okay, here we are. T-minus 7 seconds. Light the 3 main engines. Computers check them out. Everything's looking good. T0, light the solids, and away we go. There you can see us waving to the cameras as we go. Well, maybe not. Okay, here's my first word. It is, it's exciting to ride a rocket. And here's my word for being weightless. It is, it's a lot of fun. This is Hugh Gibson, commander of my first mission. And some of you might remember that old Fred Astaire movie from the early 50s where he dances around on the ceiling. It's also nice to have an audience that remembers that as well. Clunk. Okay, Jerry's going to give it a go now. Jerry, by the way, was the first person to fly 7 times in space. And so far, only Jerry and our buddy Franklin Cheng Diaz have done that so far. And he didn't get around as far as Hoop, but I thought he had a great ending here. Ta-da! Well, it's my turn. And Hoop says my legs are just too long for this. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that little white wire up there. Well, I get all tangled up in it. But here are a couple of aileron rolls to finish it off. You can see me grabbing that little black thing. That was a Sony Walkman, if you can remember those.
2-1 now to Bagwell. 34 home runs, 111 runs batted in during the regular season, 1 of 11 in the series.
This is peanut M&M baseball. Of course, the object is to catch it in your mouth. Jerry used his hands, so I think I was safe. Anyway, here's my changeup pitch to Jerry. Very appropriate scene with the Dodgers in the World Series here. And here's the old line drive to the pitcher. Oh. Now, we did have a football on board, and here's the opening kickoff to Hoot. He gets it. He sees all the tacklers coming after him. And he's out of there. Hands off the crazy legs, Mike, and here they come. Now remember, this is your tax dollars at work right here, folks. Okay, here's the big play. We're going to send Mike out for a long pass. Touchdown. By the way, that was the NFL record at 5 miles a second. That was a 15-mile pass. And here's the kick for the extra point to win the game. And it's good. Here's Greg in a slam dunk contest. See the little orange ball in his hands, and then you can see the little hoop on the left side of the screen. So let's see if Greg can dunk it here. All right. Whoa, he's going around again. All right. Okay, what I want to do now is talk a little bit about what's it like to actually live in a weightless environment. Of course, we have to eat. And a lot of the food we take up is dehydrated. We take the water out to save weight and space. So that's some rice that Kathy has in her right hand there. She's putting in our little machine. And this floating thing here is some unidentifiable vegetable. But the machine, the black knob selects the amount of water, and the yellow button adds hot water. And we had this, we call this an oven, but it really just circulated warm air around the food keep it warm while it soaked up the water, or to warm up foods that are not dehydrated. Some of the dishes, particularly the beef dishes, were not dehydrated, although we have a hamburger patty that's dehydrated. Now the yellow, as I said, is hot water. The blue button is cold water. And here's Mike fixing himself a cold orange drink. Now, obviously, a glass of liquid is not going to work very well in a weightless environment. So we had these special containers. This is one. We had two types. And even a special straw that has a clamp on it. That's because without the clamp, the liquid will actually come right out of the straw. So you have to undo the clamp, take your drink, and clamp it back up. Now, each meal is a variety of packages of food and drink. So we had this little tray so you could keep them all fastened down and not floating all around the place. And we took other foods up too, like tortillas. And Ron's getting ready to fix himself a burrito here. Now, astronauts love to play with their food, just like you do. And here, Kathy and Charlie are gobbling up M&Ms. M&Ms and goldfish crackers were our favorite food to play with. Get that last one, Charlie. Here I am with a spoonful of pudding. And here's Anna gobbling up M&Ms. Now, here's a water bubble that's loose. Now, it's surface tension that causes the liquid to form a sphere or a ball. And when Jeff comes along to suck it up, well, it makes it go right up his nose. Now, here Jeff and Sam each have a water bubble. Kind of fun to watch them come together. Now, what else can we do with a water bubble? And that's how you take a shower. Now, we obviously don't have a shower. Well, when you get up in the morning, you got to get ready for work, just like down here on the planet. Here's Mike shaving. We had both either electric or blade razors. Each had advantages and disadvantages. And here I am floating down from the flight deck to brush my teeth. We had a little hose that we hooked up to a pressurized water supply. You just squirt water in your mouth and then brush your teeth just like we do down here on the planet. The big difference, though, is we don't have a sink into which to spit the toothpaste, so you have to use an old washcloth or towel or something. Here's our space potty. You can see the directions up here on the left in the schematic, but basically it's like an outhouse arrangement with special airflow to make sure everything goes where you want it to go and that it stays there. Details at 11. Okay, this is our form of exercise, a treadmill. Notice Charlie has a harness around his shoulders and waist and then bungee cords that keep him attached to the treadmill. Without that on, every time he took a step, he'd just go floating away from the treadmill. We use this not only for muscle tone, but even more importantly for bone strength. So that jarring motion keeps our bones stimulated. Otherwise, it's very rapid osteoporosis in a weightless environment. Okay, we didn't have a shower or bathtub, so we took what we call a sponge bath. Just soap yourself down and then rinse off. You can see Mike doing here with a clean washcloth. Fortunately, you can use the hot water from the water dispenser. When you want to go to sleep, just relax, close your eyes, and go to sleep because you're weightless. But we did take sleeping bags up. You can see Shep has his hooked to the wall. You can hook it to the ceiling, floor, wherever you want. And they not only keep you from drifting around at night, bumping into things, but they also give you the feeling you're used to of the sheets on top of you and the bed underneath you. Okay, we're going to get to my third word now. It is meaningful. Yeah, we don't want to spend all those tax dollars just having excitement and fun. Now, my first mission was a classified mission for the Department of Defense, so I can't tell you about that mission. Or as the old joke goes, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you, so I won't tell you. I can tell you we deployed a satellite on that mission, but you'll just have to guess what it might have been used for. My second flight, though, was an astronomy mission called Astro 1. We carried this X-ray telescope right there in the payload bay and a suite of 3 different ultraviolet telescopes. Get them up above the Earth's atmosphere. They stayed in the shuttle, and we operated around the clock in 2 12-hour shifts studying the universe around us. The last 13 or so years of the shuttle's life was spent building the International Space Station. These are the first 2 components that went up, and this is what it looks like today. Of course, in the middle there are the modules, the habitation modules and the laboratory modules where the crew lives and does their experiments. Out on the ends are the solar arrays that collect the sun's energy and power the space station. And the white panels you see are actually radiators that radiate heat back out into space to keep it from overheating. It's the second largest object in Earth orbit. The first one is the moon. This is actually bigger both in length and width than either a football field or a soccer field. Of course, what we do in our spare time is we float to the window and look at the Earth going by below. And my word for that is? Awesome. It is awesomely awesome to look at the Earth from space. Here's some pictures that I and other astronauts have taken. This is Greenland in the North Atlantic. You can see the fjords there and the ice pack in the middle. Eastern Mediterranean. Notice how the Nile River Delta, the vegetation really stands out from the desert around it. Of course, on the right is Israel, Lebanon, Turkey at the top. Looking back across the Sinai Peninsula to the Red Sea, where Moses did a little walking around a few years ago. And when the sun's at the right angle, it makes the water features pop. You can see the Nile River there above the Red Sea. Next is the cradle of civilization, Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the country of Iraq is today. And further east, the highest mountains on the planet, the Himalayas, with India down below and the Tibetan Plateau. You can see the curvature of the Earth there I was talking about. Further east, over the Pacific, atolls, that's Bora Bora there on the right. And further east are the Galapagos Islands, old volcanic islands that come together, kind of shaped like a seahorse. Looks like on the left he's drinking some milk there, where that cloud is. It's an active volcano in Japan. And down here at the bottom, this is what cities look like from space, just kind of gray blotches. Coast of Alaska, with the glacier there in the lower right. Over California, about where we are, looking south into Mexico, that's the Salton Sea right on the bottom, and of course the Gulf of California and Baja California. Hurricane, this one's over the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to take a trip up the Mississippi River now. Here's where the Mississippi flows into the Gulf, or the Delta, and at the top is the town of New Orleans. Further north is Memphis, Tennessee. I use this to show you can see man-made objects from space besides the Great Wall of China. That's the airport right there at Memphis, and you can see the major freeway structures. Further north are the Great Lakes, the United States and Canada. Lake Michigan in the middle there with Chicago down on the south shore, Detroit in the upper right. And further east is Buffalo, New York. This is the lake snow effect that you see there with the snow on the south side. Long Island, New York, and with Manhattan right up in here in the mouth of the Hudson River. That's where our oldest grandson's going to school. And it took this over Lake Erie, looking southeast to the coast of the U.S. You can see the Chesapeake Bay there in the top middle, and that's the Shenandoah Valley going through the middle of the picture. Thunderstorms at sunset over the Pacific. Much more beautiful in person than come across here, of course. Now, sunsets are really cool from space. I love watching them down here, but they're different in space because we're going around the Earth so fast. So there you can see the bands of blue of the Earth's atmosphere I mentioned. And the cool thing of watching a sunset from orbit is you get to watch a beautiful sunset like this. And then 45 minutes later, a beautiful sunrise. 45 minutes later, another beautiful sunset. 45. That's actually one of the hard things about flying in space, is getting up in the morning, and then 45 minutes later, you got to go back to bed again. 45 minutes later. We obviously don't use the sun for our daily schedule. Well, each mission, the crew designs a patch for their mission. And my first flight, we were the second flight after the Challenger explosion. And so we have 7 stars on our patch to commemorate the crew that died. And of course, the rainbow represents God's promise of a new beginning. My second mission was the astronomy mission I mentioned, Astro 1, and we have the constellation Orion on that patch. And this is just me having fun with my video editing stuff. And that's the video. So I hope you enjoyed that. So let's see, what's next? Oh yeah, the quiz, I forgot. Okay, so I'm going to describe the word, and you shout out the word when I describe it. You're all together. Okay, what's the word for riding a rocket? Exciting, very good. You did great when it came on the screen, but could we sound a little more excited than that? Okay, what's the word for riding a rocket? Exciting. There you go, for being weightless. Fun. For doing good work? Meaningful, and looking at the Earth from space? Yeah, that's very good. Now, what I'd like to do is I got a couple of things I want to cover. And so one is to correct a misconception. So, we talked about how fun it is to be weightless, right? And so how many of you have been weightless before? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, would you like to be Terry, would you like to be weightless? I'm going to pick on, usually I ask for volunteers. Come on up here, Terry. Okay, I don't think they told you, but they've got these nuclear reactor gizmos up here. They're powered by the leftover food from the cafeteria, and they will allow us to be weightless. Yeah, okay, so you ready? So bend your knees like this, and on the count of 3, we're going to straighten our legs real fast and jump up in the air. You ready? 1, 2, 3. We're weightless, we're not. Let's give Terry a big hand. Wasn't that fun?
About a millisecond, right, of being airborne.
Yeah, actually, I missed something. I usually ask the audience to shout out together why you're weightless in space. And so let's try that. Why are you weightless in space? No gravity, yeah. So think for a second. The space station is up there right now in orbit going 17,000, this is the Earth, going 17,500 miles an hour. What would happen to it if it didn't feel the Earth's gravity? It just goes zinging off in the universe, wouldn't it? What would happen to the moon if it didn't feel the Earth's gravity? Can we tell that we're influenced by the moon's gravity down here on the surface of the Earth? Sure, the tides, very good. So yes, there is gravity in space. Now the reason folks answer no gravity or zero gravity is because we talk about the reason for the space station and all the experiments that the shuttle did in its era. The reason for them is we wanted to take advantage of the zero gravity in space to do experiments we can't do down here on the surface of the planet. But what we're talking about is the force that you feel is zero gravity. We're using the term gravity as a measurement of force, actually acceleration, okay? So like pounds or newtons or things like that. The presence of the actual attraction of two bodies of gravity is there. It's throughout the universe. It's what holds the universe together. So that's actually the magic of going, oh, wait a second. So they're weightless in space. So the reason you're weightless is because, Terry and I were weightless, is when you're falling. Okay, it's when something is preventing you from continuing to fall down to the center of the Earth is when you weigh something. You weigh something on your chairs, I weigh something standing here. But when something's not holding me, like when we go like this, we're weightless while we're in the air. Now I could jump off of here and be weightless a little longer, but you don't get to, so we've all been weightless. But you don't get to have all the fun because it lasts so short. Now jump on a trampoline, jump off a high dive or something, you'll have a little more time. So they are weightless in space because they are falling. They've been falling, space station's been falling for over 20 years and hadn't hit the Earth yet. That's the magic of that 17,500 miles an hour you hear me keep talking about. is that's how fast you go in low Earth orbit, up around 250, 300 miles. And when I'm going 17,500 miles an hour zinging off in the universe, the force of gravity causes me to fall at exactly the same rate. So I zing off and fall, zing off and fall, zing off and fall. And that keeps me at the same altitude. If I go a little faster, I'm going to zing off a little faster than I'm falling, and I'm going to go higher. But just like when you throw a rock up in the air, it starts slowing down. I'm going to start slowing down. If I'm just coasting, I fire my engines, go a little faster, and then coast. I'll slow down. I'll get in an elliptical orbit around the Earth, because when I slow down, I'll fall back then and speed up as I'm falling down. I'll be in an ellipse like this. And if you look at some of the trajectories of the satellites we send out, you'll see that's why they're in ellipses, because that's the way orbital mechanics work. There's your orbital mechanics lesson for today. Okay. Now, if I go fast enough, I'm never going to slow down enough to fall back to the Earth. That magic number for low Earth orbit around the Earth is 25,000 miles an hour. So that's how fast you got to go. The rocket we just launched with that satellite that's going to Europa, Jupiter's moon, 25,000 miles an hour, and that's where you get fast to get back to the moon or off to Mars or Jupiter or wherever else to get in orbit around the sun. Okay? So now if I want to come home, all I got to do is slow down just a little bit. And so it took us 4 million pounds of rocket fuel to accelerate to 17,500 miles an hour. That's how much rocket fuel it would take to slow down. But we don't have that much fuel to get rid of that speed. So what we do is we just slow down a couple hundred miles an hour, and then that's enough that we're going to fall just a little bit faster than we're zinging off, and we'll come down into the Earth's atmosphere enough where it gets thick enough that it's going to continue to slow us down. And when it slows us down some more, we're going to fall a little more faster than we're zinging off and slow down, so we end up coming on down. We get rid of all that speed by heat of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, so we're warming up the planet a little extra when we come back from space. Okay, so you are weightless because you are falling. There is gravity in space. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to, I've got a couple other things to talk about. Let's go to Q&A here, though, for a minute and see what you're interested in. Oh, Terry's going to get a microphone so we can hear. Everybody can hear. Why don't you go ahead and I'll repeat it.
What can you tell us about the two astronauts stuck in space?
Yeah, the two astronauts stuck in space, Butch and Suni, who I actually don't know. I just know their names. They came along long after I had left. So what happened was Boeing, they had a new crew module way behind SpaceX's crew module to take astronauts into orbit. So Butch and Suni were the first two to fly it as a test. They'd flown it with nobody on board and tested it out, and it seemed to work fine. So they took it up, and when on the way there, they had problems with some of the rocket, the little jet engines on it, or rocket engines rather. And so they didn't want to risk them coming home in it and have it not worked. So they brought it home empty. Turned out it worked okay. But Butch and Suni are up there with no way to get back. So what they did is the space station continuously has people on board. And so usually 2 crews, of a total of 7, because we carry 4 on our crew capsule, the Crew Dragon, and the Russians carry 3 on their Soyuz. And so they take them up and they rotate them out about every 5 or 6 months. So on orbit, there were a crew of 4 and a crew of 3, and Butch and Suni, with no seats to come home in. So what they did was the 4-person crew was due to come back in another month or so. So what they did, they were going to launch a 4-person crew to replace that 4-person crew. So what they did is that 4-person crew, they only launched 2 people. So it launched several weeks ago. It's up and Butch and Suni joined that crew for their 5 to 6 month tour. So Butch and Suni were going to go up for 7 days, and it turns now into 7 months because they are now part of that 4-person crew that will come back in March or February, I think February. And so, but it's not just those 2 affected, but there were 2 astronauts who were planning to go up to the space station, and now they didn't get to go. So it also affected them as well. But that's the story there. We got one here.
What limits the life time of a space shuttle? Not a space station.
The space station, well, it ages, obviously not as bad as it does, it's like Southern California compared to the East Coast of the U.S., where old cars here last forever, it seems, and the East Coast, they rust out in 10 years. So you're up in a vacuum, but you're also getting hit with little tiny debris up there as well. And just things wear out, and then you also worry about, well, what was it designed to do? And scientists could probably continue to come up with experiments for it to use, but as things wear out, it's just like having an old car, eventually it's time to retire it. And so they've kept the space station going a lot longer than it was anticipated, and they've now, I think, 2030 is when they plan to deorbit it. And they're actually doing the plans now to have, they'll have to launch like our crew capsules, or our resupply vehicles, and it'll just be with fuel that will burn to deorbit the space station. It'll take a lot more because it's so massive up there to bring it down. And so that's what limits it. It's just like us, I guess.
Two questions about returning. You talked about dropping speed by about 200 miles an hour. How long in advance of returning did you have to start that process?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, how long does it take?
Yeah.
And did you ever land out here in Palmdale?
Yeah. Both of my flights, we landed up at Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah, at Edwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of my flights we did. Landed up there. The reason was, after Challenger, we not only fixed the problem that caused the accident with the solid rocket boosters leaking, they also did a top-to-bottom review and looked at all other areas of risk and to see what other areas they could reduce the risk. And one was the nose wheel steering. So you land and you got to roll out to a stop in the shuttle, and turns out there were some single fault tolerant failures, or zero fault tolerant, that would not have the nose wheel steering. And so if you're landing at Edwards out on the lake bed and you run off the runway, it's no big deal. It's still hard surface lake bed. In Florida, you're in the ditch with the alligators. So we landed out here just to we did some testing as we rolled out of the new nose wheel steering. Well, where we saw Southern California was in orbit. And we came in from the north. We were in what we call a 57-degree inclination orbit. So you've got the Earth, and then your orbit is like around the equator or tilted up. And we were in a 57-degree, which is the highest you can go launching out of Florida. You launch up the East Coast. If you go any steeper, your boosters might land on Savannah or Jacksonville, one of those places, and they don't like that. So. So we're coming back down from the north when we landed. So we actually came down, I think we coasted in up around Oregon even, and then just came on down across California that way, across the San Joaquin Valley, and came into Edwards and landed that way. Not doing a lot of sightseeing there. You're busy focused on getting ready to bring it around and land it. Yeah. Oh, I didn't. Let me finish 1 second.
Oh, sure.
1 hour. You fire your deorbit engines 1 hour before landing on the other side of the planet.
Sheesh.
So, and you want to make sure the weather's good when you get there, because there's no waving off. You're going to be there.
Wow. The Challenger explosion was, impacted everybody, but it can't. You knew you were going to be going up to. Later, I'd like to know just how you thought about that, but more importantly, maybe even than that, I'd like to know how your wife thought about it.
Yeah, well, I always bring up Linda when I answer that question, because you used the word scared. Notice it wasn't one of my words, okay? And it's not one of my words. And so this is actually a great thing when I'm speaking to a secular audience. I'll get that question, so it allows me to share the following. And that is that scared was not one of my words, but I don't want to take away from the fact I was excited. This was a boyhood dream, okay? And finally, at age 40, I'm realizing I'm lying there on the launch pad. Now, we knew that there was risk involved with the shuttle. When you actually lose lives of friends doing that risk, that brings it home a little closer. And I thought I might feel fearful. So I got 4 reasons why not. One, I lived a life with perhaps a little bit more risk than the average person. I flew in combat in Vietnam. I was a test pilot, drove a car in New York City and Manila, things like that. So I experienced a little more risk than the average person, perhaps. Number two, I knew that I had literally thousands of very dedicated people around the country who had spent the previous nearly 3 years doing their best to make sure my flight was as safe as practical. And so I have trust, is another reason. The third thing is pilot astronaut. If everything goes right during launch, we don't do anything. The computers handle all that, lighting the engines, the trajectory you go up, and shutting the engines down, getting the external tank off even, and then you take over manually and get configured for being in orbit. But we have trained literally thousands of hours in simulators in case things go wrong. And then we have to respond immediately to reconfigure switches or operate inputs to the keyboard to get you in a safer configuration than you were in before when that went wrong. So mentally, you're very busy. That's not to say I didn't peek out the window and watch the east coast of the U.S. go by and the atmosphere go from blue to black. So mentally, not very. Now that's not to say that the mission specialist riding down in the middeck with no window, staring at the lockers and nothing to do, and having to trust the crazy pilot upstairs to do the right thing. That's not saying that scared might not be one of his or her words. So, and then finally, fourth, as a man of faith, I was where I thought God wanted me to be, and what better place than that, even if things go wrong. So that's probably the main reason I was there. So I was very excited, but very much at peace. Matter of fact, Linda and I were in a astronaut Bible study that met every couple of weeks or every week, I don't remember. And my flight was launched on December 2nd, 1988, and also December 2nd, 1990. I only launched December 2nd, that's my rule. And although it was supposed to be December 1st and in May on the second flight. Anyway, we had a meeting, so we got back and had our Bible study meeting just before Christmas. So, and we rotate the houses, and this happened to be at Dave Hilmer's house. Now, Dave was a mission specialist that flew on the flight before mine, the first flight after Challenger that had launched that summer. And so rather than doing a Bible study, Dave said, let's just go around the room and have everybody share how the Lord has moved in your life in a significant way this year. And Dave kicked it off with that same story, being very much at peace, very excited. It was his second flight. And then he shared the verse from Philippians 4, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, with prayer and petition. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding surround your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Linda, that verse had been given to her years before. And so, and by the way, when I first met Linda and we were dating, we were in college, I told her I was going to be an astronaut someday. So I warned her. And having me gone to Vietnam for a year early in our marriage was a lot more stressful than watching me blast off on the shuttle, of course, as well. But she had her story is very similar to mine, that same incredible peace of the Lord when she... Now I will tell the story. I think if you picked it up in the video in the day launch, when we light the three main engines, the exhaust goes down through these openings in the launch pad and then diverted out a tunnel, and there's a bunch of water in there in bags underneath you that break, and then they flood the launch pad with water, and that's just to absorb a lot of that energy so it doesn't bounce back up and damage the back of the shuttle as you're launching off. Well, of course, all that water turns to steam, and so out the end of that tunnel is a big cloud of steam comes up. And what I didn't warn Linda about, because I never thought about it, was where she was watching from the roof of the Launch Control Center with the kids, is when she's watching the shuttle, that tunnel comes out between the shuttle and where she's standing. And so and then of course, there's a delay in the noise that you get from 3 miles away from what you see, and so they count down to T0, And she sees this, actually just before they get to T0, she sees this huge cloud of smoke obscure us from her. And she's going, is it supposed to do that? And then, of course, a couple seconds later, we come lifting out of that cloud of smoke, and so it was okay. But hope that answers that question. Okay, where's, oh, you've got the mic here, yeah.
Mic over here. I think I do. There we go. You had mentioned that as you're floating with weightless, that you have to take time to do the treadmill just to keep your bones going.
Yeah.
And osteoporosis could set in if you didn't do that. What about those two astronauts that are still up there? What is the effect on their bodies?
Well,
in being
all the
there?
astronauts on the station, they have to exercise, I think, an hour or two a day.
Okay.
And so and treadmill is part of it. Now, they have a lot of other equipment as well, and some of it's designed to stimulate you like the treadmill does as well, but a lot of it's just a, bungee cord kind of stuff. And so they have to exercise 1 or 2 hours, I'm not sure which, a day. Okay. And still, when they come back after 5 or 6 months, there might be a little bit of bone loss and loss of some strength.
So they are keeping track of what...
Oh, yeah. We are guinea pigs.
Yeah.
When we're up there. So before you go up, you do all kinds of medical tests, and how strong you are and all that, your bone density and all that. And then when you come back, they'll test you as well. They probably do some testing in the interim. I'm really not familiar with how much they do while they're up there, but they probably have some mechanisms to do that, instruments to do that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, Helen, and then we'll come back here.
Preparations as a team, when you go up, you're the captain. Everyone's very clear about the pecking order of who has the word, the final word on things, and how are personalities analyzed at the beginning to make sure that that's going to work. The second question is, when you sleep, do you feel when you wake up that you've actually had a rest?
Yeah, on the second one, yes.
And then the third, I'm a nurse.
Oh, okay.
How does the system work? I mean, do you acclimatize fairly? Does your gastrointestinal system acclimatize pretty quickly?
Yeah, well, if I stand on my head, it works fine. Here. Being weightless is very similar to a lot of people you worked with. It's very similar to being horizontal. Things just work, okay? Because there's no gravity making it work like when we have standing up. A few minor things that happen. One, on day one, our body's designed to be pumping not only our blood, but our lymph system is designed to be pumping up to our head because gravity is pulling it down because we're not falling anymore and is pulling it down. So we have designed body systems to do that, to keep our head, blood and liquid, water in our head. What happens when you get to weightless, probably similar to being bedridden a lot, is now my body doesn't need that much water because it doesn't need to be pumping it. It's not falling down, so it doesn't need to have this excess water that is pumping up. And so what happens on day one is still pumping it up, and you look 5 or 10 years younger because all the liquid in your head pops out some of the wrinkles. But your body goes, okay, I don't need that water, and you get rid of it. And it automatically, I mean, the human body, God, it just amazes me more and more if you think about it. It just regulates itself. You get rid of that water, the wrinkles come back, and then before you come back to land, you got to be sure and overhydrate to make sure you got the excess of water for when you try to get back in where you're now weigh something again. The first question I get asked a lot, what do you need to do to become an astronaut? So I talk about education and then whatever field you go into, doing well in that field. And then I say one of the things that's not listed in the application brochure that they're really trying to figure out, if you make it through the various narrowing downs to the final interview process, is they're looking for somebody who can work as a team. No egos involved. you got to be able to work as a team, not just with your crewmates, but your main job is actually working with the teams of the thousands of people who make it all happen, because none of them are trained to fly in space, or none of them have flown this. It's not like when you drive a car, that car is built, designed, and tested by people who drive cars. And so your main job as an astronaut is to be the user representative, I call it, in these, like I worked in mission control, to give the astronaut perspective to the decision-making process in mission control. The flight director's the main guy, the head guy making the final decisions. I worked at Florida, at the Cape, helping get vehicles ready. So if there are problems in the processing, you have a crew member there who's trained to fly it, who can make the input as to what the workaround's going to be. I worked in software development, not writing code, but getting in the simulator and testing what the software code writers have done. Does that really manifest itself in what we wanted it to do, kind of thing? So that's kind of your main job. So you're kind of selected for the ability to work as a team, and then everybody has a backup. So there's not a single task that only one person is trained to do. And then you have the commander is the final say in what you do. And my experience on my two crews, everybody we just knew that. And you train for a year ahead of time as a crew, or more if your flight gets delayed like mine, and you become good friends. Yeah, the movie Armageddon, was it Armageddon with Julia Roberts? And yeah, that beginning is so phony because they're building character. They're doing character development for the audience, but to have what's his name flying around asking her all these questions, and I'm going, you got to be kidding me. They would have had dinner together as families and everything else for a year before they flew in space. Anyway, I digress. Brings up one other thing. We got a question here.
Yes, since you were kind enough to mention your faith, I wondered how or if being out and seeing the immensity of the planet, the immensity of space, how that might have affected your faith.
Yeah, my faith, and that's not an uncommon question too. I was a man of faith before I went up. And so sometimes the question is formatted in the phrase, were you closer to God in space? And what do you think the answer is? No. The answer, of course, is no. I actually feel closer to God when I'm in a group of fellow believers like this than you do in a crew of 5 or 7 up in orbit around the Earth, some believers, some not believers. But it was a wonderful experience, an awesome experience, to know the Creator and have a relationship with the Creator and look down on His creation from a perspective that so far very few humans have had. And to look at that. There's something, I didn't hear this term until about 10 or 15 years ago, long after I'd flown, called the overview effect, where people are struck by looking down at the planet and realizing their place in the universe. And I like Dick Truly, after one of the astronauts on the second shuttle flight came back, and in the press conference he talked about you don't see any borders from orbit. So it's that, just an appreciation. I had an experience earlier in my life flying. We had these little jet trainers we would fly as astronauts for proficiency flying, and then to get from point A to point B to go. And I was flying from Houston down to Florida to work at the Cape. And for those from New England, I'm talking about Cape Canaveral, not the Cape Cod. So I'm solo by myself in the plane at night at about 40,000 feet, going across the Mississippi Delta. And it was like one of those clear, beautiful nights, and I would turn my cockpit lights down as much as I could and still fly, so you can see the universe around you and all the stars, and then where they blend in with the lights on the ground out on the horizon, it's almost hard to tell. And looking down on the city of New Orleans with, 800,000 people or so, then the lights spread out across the Delta where roads don't even go, and the lights on the oil rigs out in the Gulf. And I was just struck by how insignificant I am in this vast, incredible universe with these billions of people on the planet. But instantly at the same time, I was struck by the fact that our God is so awesome, that he knows and loves each individual one of us and makes us very special. Each of the now 8 billion of us on the planet. So.
Well, I think you just pronounced the benediction on this on this incredible presentation. So can we show our appreciation to Guy?
Thank you. Terry, can I take one more minute?
Yeah.
I want to go over those 4 words again. Let's do that before I let you out of here. Okay, what's the word for riding a rocket?
Exciting.
Good, that's almost as exciting sounding as the first time. What's the word for being weightless?
Fun.
For doing good work? And for looking at the earth from space?
Awesome.
And do you have to go to space to have a life that's exciting, fun, meaningful, and awesome? Of course not.
No.
Try a life living in relationship with the Creator, with Jesus Christ. And it's those 4 words and more. Thank you.
Well, thank
God
you,
bless.
Guy. Thank you.
Thank you.
On top of caring for grandchildren at their home all day, there's another commitment that Guy and Linda have this evening. Their granddaughter has qualified for volleyball playoffs, and the first game is at 6 o'clock. So Guy is not able to stay for dinner this evening, so there won't be any tables set up for speaker discussion. But Guy, we want to invite you back at some point with Linda, and we can have that conversation. So we would love to do that. So for next week, let me just say a word about what will happen. Our convocation next week moves from space to what goes on among us as people. We're going to watch a 30-minute video produced by Kristen Dumais, who was the author of Jesus and John Wayne. And the video is called For Our Daughters. And it's a description of the scourge of sexual abuse and sexual assault in the church. This is quite a piece that she has produced. So it's about a 30-minute video. We'll watch that, and then we'll have discussion together among us here in Marwick. So we invite you back next Thursday for our convocation. Guy, we are so grateful for your presentation. Thanks to all of you who are here and for those of you who are online, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.